I wake up, I don't touch my phone, I spend some time outside with my kids, and then the next thing I do is I sit down with my journals. So I've been journaling off and on for most of my life. I started when I was a kid, I would stop, I would get started. Like a lot of people, it was a habit that I knew was important, but it just never really stuck. I remember I was visiting my friend Casey Neistat, and he had all these amazing journals, like years and years of his creative thinking on this shelf in his office. And I was like, that's so cool. I was like, I wish I'd done that. And he said, why don't you just start now? And I remember I bought this Moleskine. This is when journaling really stuck for me, and it's become part of my morning routine. I'm Ryan Holiday. I've written now 11 or 12 books. I didn't even know about Stoic philosophy. I've been lucky enough to speak all over the world to the NBA, the NFL, special forces, and sitting senators. But I've been on this philosophical journey, this journey through Stoicism for a decade and a half now. And a huge part of that journey has been journaling. In fact, you could really argue that Stoicism and journaling are inseparable from each other. And actually in 2 or 3 days, I will be starting my 4th go-around of the Daily Stoic Journal. I know it's a little weird to do your own journal, but it's basically just a prompt each day. Like, how am I preparing in the off season for what is to come? And you reflect on that in the morning and the evening. How can I see these difficulties as a lesson and a test? So each day there's a question and you explore that question. And I'd use usually a blank journal too. I have a gratitude journal. I have this 1 line a day journal. I have a bunch of different journals I do, but I've been doing this now for a long time. And I've been studying some of the great journaling practices of creative people and leaders and thinkers and philosophers, of course. So in today's episode, I want to give you a bunch of secrets to being a great journaler, to getting the most out of your journaling practice. Here we go. The first lesson I would give anyone about journaling is just start. Don't stress about tools, don't stress about time, don't stress about how much, how little, should you read it? Just do it, right? Actually, one of the journals that I love this 1 line a day journal. It was helpful for me when I was getting started because it's just, you just write one thing every day. I've done 1 line a day now for 5 years. I'm almost finished with this. But the idea is everyone has time and the willpower to write 1 sentence a day. So don't start by saying, I want to write 10 pages or I want to spend 30 minutes journaling. Just like with meditation, don't start with an hour-long solo meditation. Start with 1 minute or 5 minutes, right? Start really small. So the idea is to build the habit, build the momentum, get into it, make it a habit, and then you can build. So I started with something like the 1 line a day journal, or the Daily Stoic Journal is an easy one too, because it's prompt. The 5-minute journal is great. You've got 5 minutes, So do something that helps build the practice. Maybe just start a workout journal, just log your workouts, or a reading journal, or a food journal. Start something that's more of a practice, and then it's building the skill, the willpower for you to do it on an ongoing basis. Walter Isaacson, when he was writing his epic biography of Steve Jobs, talked about how they went and they tried to find a bunch of old documents and journals that Steve Jobs had done on one of the early Macintoshes. And even Steve Jobs, with all his computing genius and access to the best programmers and designers and engineers in the world, couldn't manage to get these files off this old Mac. And Walter Isaacson was joking about how absurd that was. You couldn't access these files that were just, a couple decades old at most. And yet he could spend hours poring over the journals of Leonardo da Vinci. Don't think of journaling as this epic thing, but it also is important. And there's something important about doing it on physical paper. I think it's good to be free of devices anyway, to have something that's not digital. But I just love the idea that, 600-700 years later or whatever, Da Vinci's journals are still legible and usable, but things that you did 2 iPhones ago are lost to all time. Epictetus says, every night keep thoughts like these at hand, write them, read them aloud, talk to yourself and others about them. I think this is an important part. Stoicism isn't this thing that you're just absorb one time and it's just in your brain and you have it forever. It's actually an ongoing process, an engagement with the ideas over and over again. One of the criticisms of Marcus Aurelius' meditations by academics who don't get this is that it's kind of repetitive. It's repetitive, sure, but he was doing it over a long period of time. He might have wrote one entry and then another one 7 years later. It could have been 7 days apart. But this is what he needed. This is what he was struggling with. He wasn't writing the journal for you. He was writing them for himself. And actually, in Caridian, that's what survives to us from Epictetus. It's this idea of at hand. It's there for you. It's almost like a weapon. So when you think of journaling, don't think of it as putting down your thoughts necessarily for history, performing for history, although that could be cool depending on what you're experiencing. But think about it also as a process that you are engaging in. Even though I know about and write about Stoicism, I also explore it privately in my journal every day because I need reminders of the ideas, and spending time with them, writing them down, reminding myself of them, keeping them at hand, as Epictetus says, is a hugely beneficial exercise for me. I'm sure many of you read Anne Frank's diary when you were in school, or you've heard of it. You think about how insanely stressful and scary that would be. It'd be insanely stressful and scary to be a 13-year-old girl, let alone locked in an attic with your parents and another family, worried about what's happening in the world. But she has this great line in her diary that I think about. She says, "Paper is more patient than people." Instead of vomiting your thoughts on your employees, on your friends, on your coworkers, on the driver in front of you who's taking forever, put it on the page. The page is forgiving and patient. It keeps secrets. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're contradicting yourself. It doesn't care if you're being a baby. It doesn't care if you're whining. Just put it down on the page. The page will help, right? And I love the idea of having distance between you and your thoughts. Part of the reasons we're worked up and anxious and stressed is that we're trapped in our heads with all this stuff, right? And you get it out and you see it from a distance and you go, I don't even agree with my own thoughts here, right? I don't even like this. I'm not gonna choose to carry this around. So putting it down on the page is just really important.
What's really interesting about philosophy is that that's what Marcus Aurelius' Meditations was. It's one of the few philosophical books that we have that wasn't published as a book. He wasn't, the most powerful man in the world wasn't writing what he thought. He was writing what he felt he needed to know for himself, and it's only a complete accident that this work survives to us. He'd probably be mortified that we're reading his diary or journal, but he's dead, so it doesn't matter. The point is, philosophy is not just this thing you read about one time and understand. It's an active practice. It's something you're doing with yourself. It's a dialogue with oneself. I talked about the missile crisis a little bit. What I think is so fascinating about the missile crisis is that we have Kennedy's doodles and notes from the missile crisis. On legal pads, he would write these things to himself, sort of reminders. He would write missile, 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 or he'd write consensus, consensus, consensus. He was journaling out, working out what he was thinking as he was thinking it. Journaling's not the only way to do this. I know people that doodle in the morning or sketch, but the point is to have kind of a creative practice where there are very low stakes, and it's just sort of getting the juices flowing. Julia Cameron calls morning pages a sort of a form of spiritual windshield wipers, and I really like that analogy. Kennedy really liked boating, and so he drew these pictures of sailboats. You can imagine the entire world is about to blow itself up, and if he's not careful, he's going to contribute to that. The idea of just getting out of that, zooming out, sort of calming his mind, you can see how valuable and important that would be. Think about the stresses of the missile crisis. It makes sense why he's writing on. He wants to dump out his anger and his frustration and his fears and the ideas that he's workshopping where there are low stakes so he can perform better where there's really high stakes. So I think journaling is a really important part of it.
If you want to learn more about Stoic philosophy, totally for free, you can sign up for a daily Stoic email. It's one free email every morning, the best of Stoic wisdom, dailystoic.com/email.